ACC Kickoff week is now officially here. We're getting that much closer to football season. What are some of the top storylines for NC State?
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. The playoffs are gone and sports have stopped sporting the way we want them to. But this summer, that's where FanDuel steps in. FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Monday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. Kenton, ACC Kickoff week is officially here. It's one of the more exciting weeks of the entire offseason. I know the spring game is probably technically considered preseason football. I consider ACC Media Week to be like the official beginning of the preseason, because after this, you get fall camp starting up, I believe just the week after, and then the excitement really gets going. But we're going to start looking at storylines. I'll be in the house on Thursday, excited to see our guys down in Charlotte. First, we're going to start with the ACC on a broad spectrum. In terms of the ACC as a whole and the health of the ACC, what are you expecting to hear from Jim Phillips this week?
I'm expecting him to keep it very ho-hum and very, blase. I'm not really expecting anything that's too out there because that's not Jim Phillips' personality. Yeah. Even if there was something that he did want to say that he was very passionate about, I would know that he would find a way to make it very, blah and boring. My biggest question to him would be, is there a chance that after the lawsuits are settled or whatever the case happens with that, Florida State and Clemson can come back to the conference? Because with what the latest statements that we've seen from the Big Ten and the SEC in regards to, Florida State and Clemson, it really does seem like we're in a bizarre world moment of, man, where are those two going to land? And you know what? As the old saying goes, sometimes it's cheaper to keep her. And would that work out for both parties here to just say, you know what? Let's drop these lawsuits. We may not love each other, but, we'll let these things ride for now.
Yeah, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what Jim Phillips is going to be asked repeatedly about during his appearance on Monday. It's going to be all about Clemson. It's going to be all about Florida State, where the conference is moving forward. The new partners as well. You got SMU, Cal, and Stanford making their first appearance at ACC Kickoff. He's just going to play it very political. Like Kenton said, that's just kind of in his nature. He's not going to give you too much of a look behind the curtain. But nonetheless, it is a little bit of a revolutionary year for the ACC. The new look ACC for the first time, so to speak, before they kick this thing off in August. Now let's look more NC State focused here. Kenton, what are some of the bigger storylines that begin this week for NC State football?
This is the most hype NC State's ever had. This is the most hype that NC State's ever had. How do you maintain being a team that is the hunter while still some people are picking you as one of the favorites? You're looking at, I believe, the fourth or fifth best odds in the conference to win it all. And so, that's a situation where it's higher than it's ever been. And also, how do you, through all this hype, how do you maintain the parts of the team that are critical? Because in the past, we have seen it hasn't been the auxiliary things that have held NC State back from getting double-digit games or that have held NC State back from the goal of an ACC championship. It's been mission-critical parts, right? You talk about the year that Devin Leary won ACC Player of the Year, and then he gets hurt. He's done by, I believe it was the fourth or fifth game of the year. He was done for. And so you're looking at a situation like that where you're like, man, that's tough. And then in other years where I believe it was 2018 or 19, the Wake Forest game, the defense is there every single time, and yet they panic at the moment of truth every time to kind of lose it. Again, these are mission-critical moments. These are not things that break down the team where it's like, oh, we missed the kick here, and that's why we didn't go. Or, oh, man, this thing got – it's literally been things that are vital to your success as a team every time. So how do you protect from those things? How do you learn from it, grow from it, and protect in terms of those things that are glaringly obvious as, hey, this needs to be addressed to keep yourself from being on the outside looking in once again.
One of the questions that Kenton asked Coach Doran last year that has stuck with me is basically this program's been right on the doorstep of breaking into 10 wins and getting into that next level of college football prestige. How is that going to change? Back at that time, it was 2023. How would that change in 2023? And Coach Doran's answer was sometimes it's one player, sometimes it's one play. And this year, I'm going to ask him a little bit of a different reiteration of kind of the same question, but more or less, they're right there. They've been right there at the doorstep for quite some time. We all understand this. What is it going to take for NC State to kick in that door in 2024? I'll be very interested to see his take on that. I think another big story, I would love to know how Coach Doran now feels about the transfer portal after previous comments about it. It's not exactly his favorite thing to get into, but he would bust his you-know-what to be in the mix with everyone else. Kenta, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I really, when I look at the portal, the only question that can be asked of Doran is how have you gotten so good at it so quickly? I mean, right. NC State has been one of the greatest beneficiaries of the portal in terms of, you've got to look at the portal as cash in, cash out. What are you losing versus what are you bringing in year over year, right? If you're losing a guy who did not play much or who did play but wasn't impactful, how much of a loss is it, right? Now, if you're losing a starter and all conference guy that's like, hey, I'm going for greener pastures, going for more money elsewhere, then you're looking at a very different situation. But in terms of who has left NC State for the most part, how many guys can we say left NC State that not only had the potential to be impactful, but were factually impactful? And that's not taking shots at anybody. It's not saying, oh, all of these guys are – I expect some of these guys to blow up at their new school. I'm not going to say any names because that would de facto mean the guys I don't mention, I don't expect to do nothing. But there are guys I wholeheartedly believe in a new system where they are a centerpiece or they're more focused to be utilized, or in a lesser conference, they're going to be stars. But when you look at who NC State has brought in on the flip side, I mean, time after time after time, you look at getting players that were impactful. Brennan Armstrong, last year, Red Hibbler last year, a guy who was terrorizing folks off the edge. And we all know Brennan Armstrong, the ups, downs, to everything. He was there. He was a consistent guy in terms of, he showed up and battled every game. That's the accuracy may not have been there. There may have been some tough moments, but say he didn't show up in battle. Tell me a game where you looked at him and you looked like he tapped out and no-mossed that thing out. So, there are plenty of impactful pieces that we're getting out of the portal, and we're not seeing many impactful pieces leave. So my question to Doran about the portal would be, how have you gotten so good at it so quickly, especially when self-admittedly it's not your favorite thing?
One of our listeners actually tweeted at us at the end of last week that in his dynasty season on College Football 25, Julian Gray had actually won the Heisman at Liberty in that simulated season. Maybe that will happen to him in real life. We'd be very happy for him, but that's a great point that NC State has not really been burned by anybody exiting the program. They've kind of gone on to relatively smaller programs than those that would be an equivalent to like another P4 school. It just really hasn't happened. I'd say the biggest transfer of recent would have to be Devin Leary. And even he did not have, that great of a season at Kentucky, struggled a little bit. So the talent acquisition for NC State the last couple of years has been absolutely revolutionary to where this program can go in the near future. The way they have been evaluating new talent and kind of reassessing what they currently have, I don't want to say cutting losses. I think that's a little bit too harsh. You get what I'm pointing to here. They've been able to evaluate who they can bring in to help them immediately, while sometimes the best scenario for others would be moving on elsewhere. And that's just the way this thing goes. So that is a great point about Coach Doran, not exactly having kind words about the transfer portal in the past, but the way that they have adapted in such a short amount of time, it is more or less the reason we stand where we stand. So those are a couple of the bigger storylines heading into ACC Kickoff week. Tell us what you think are the big storylines revolving the NC State Wolfpack, as preseason, in my opinion, is now officially here for college football. Throw that down in the comment box. We'd love to see your thoughts on that. Coming up next, we're going to get into Mailbag Monday. Did not have a chance to get through Fan Friday on Friday, so you know what that means. We're back here on Monday, and we got a mailbag full. This comes after a quick word from our sponsors. Today's sponsor is FanDuel. Look, we all love sports. In fact, we love them so much, we're anxiously waiting for them to return. The playoffs are gone. Baseball is really all we have to rely on right now, The Olympics are in the future, but we all know we're anxiously waiting for college football. But in the meantime, FanDuel helps us keep the sports going whenever we want. All we have to do is open up the app and dream up any bets at any time you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Middle portion of our Monday show. Now getting into Mailbag Monday, looking back on all of our comments of the week. Here we go. First one here comes from I Love God 7539. I'm not trying to take anything away from the attendees. I just don't understand why you wouldn't reward an amazing talent like KC for staying when he was the only talent we had almost on offense all last year. So this is in reference to the 3 ACC Kickoff attendees being named: Davin Vann, Grayson McCall, and Jordan Waters. Kenton, are you surprised that KC Concepcion was not named as one of the 3?
No, for a multitude of reasons. All right, so I Love God 7539. I've been in this deal. Let me explain to you how it works. They don't pick the 3 most marketable players, the 3 best players, whatever the case may be. It's 3 guys they think will be great representatives of the teams that also want to do it, right? So that's also a part of it. Every player does not love me to death. I was one of those guys that if I was healthy enough and if I was, deemed an impact player, I would have loved to. But you see what I'm doing right now. I obviously love talking to people. I love being in the media. There are guys who were not that way. Thomas Teal was a hell of a ball player. For those of you who remember, he was a really good defensive tackle when we were at State together. And I saw him recently, and he and I talk from time to time still to this day. And, I asked him to come on the pod, and he said, man, I ain't never been the type to talk. You know what I mean? That really ain't my thing. And that's, no shot at Tom, because I love the brother, and he knows that's no disrespect intended. That's just not his personality and his countenance. If this is not something that KC sought out and wanted, then it's not too surprising that he didn't show up. And one final thing on this. Not only that, sometimes if there are multiple people who want to go from the same side of the ball and all that, you do it by seniority. KC has at least one more year to be able to go.
Right. At
least. Waters and McCall are gone next year. Doesn't matter how you cut it, how you slice it. Those 2 are out of the door. They will no longer be at NC State next year. And so, that's just – I wouldn't take away that this is a denigration or punishment or a not rewarding of KC. I would just say there are multiple things that could be going on here as to why, it's not a big deal. Now, if KC was tweeting disgruntled about this, oh, wow, what a joke. Oh, wow, they just get anybody to go to media days these days. Then, yes, I would be concerned. I would be very worried. But as it stands right now, a whole lot of nothing.
Last point here, I would imagine that oftentimes the attendees are probably going to be your captains for the season as well. Now, this might sound crazy. I don't know if KC's going to be a captain this year. I think he's a leader in that wide receiving group, but being just a sophomore and as amazing as he was just a freshman, I think that they're still going to look to these older guys, that seniority, like Kenton was talking about, to be those representatives of NC State. And again, there's nothing wrong with that at all. I'm sure if KC was selected, he'd be excellent. Or maybe he had the option and chose not to go. Either way you slice it, it's not wrong on either side. 3 that were chosen were excellent selections. I have no doubt that KC is full steam ahead, focused on the season. Next one here comes from Fred Woods. He says, Grayson McCall came to State to chew bubblegum and whip some butt, and he's all out of bubblegum. Yes, very excited to hear from Grayson McCall this week at ACC Kickoff. I've been so thoroughly impressed with everything I have already heard from him in the media up to this point. He sounds like exactly what you want out of a quarterback and a leader. He does know why he was brought to NC State this year. It's to go and compete for not only an ACC championship, but also for a spot in the CFP. He knows damn well why he was brought here to lead this program in 2024. From everything we've heard, both from other local media and some of those clips in the spring game, he embodies exactly what you want as a leader of the pack.
Yeah, and, if he's out of bubblegum, tell him go ask Mama D in the front at the Murph for some. She's always got a little something on her. But with that being said, Grayson McCall is a guy that at the end of the day, we're all expecting big things out of him. We're all expecting the pack to whoop some butt this year. And he's expected to be the stalwart at the quarterback position. He's expected to be steady. He's expected to be good this year. And I'll tell you, in terms of looking at how we talk about Grayson McCall, right? Grayson and I have often said of Grayson McCall, you don't have to be a superstar. You don't have to be Mr. All-World, but it'd be nice. It'd be nice. You know what I mean? You don't have to be the guy that every play is, a lot of people talk about the difference between a game manager and game changer and all that good stuff. If he is a good game manager, NC State will be just fine. We'll find ourselves in Charlotte and all those good things. But again, if he's a game changer in the positive, hey, I'll take it. I'm excited to see what he's going to do. And like I said, if he's all out of bubblegum, get him some more. Get him what the man needs to do the butt whipping.
Perfect time to set the tone before the season even begins this Thursday at ACC Kickoff. Last one of our first section here. This one comes from Shanerman29. He says, recruits have seen the track record State has with developing players and what can happen if they put in the work. Seeing this and seeing the track record of player development or lack of from certain other schools with a track record of wasting talent, how are these other schools picking up the 4- and 5-star players? So this is in regards to us discussing if player development will catch up, or actually the inverse, recruiting levels will catch up to player development at State. Without having to dig too deep, I can imagine there's a very specific school that Shanerman may have in mind here, but the overall answer is brand. And that is something that NC State has been fighting with for quite some time. When you look down the street and you see the facilities they got, the logo that they plaster everywhere, a lot of times that makes themselves a very attractive place for higher end talent. Now, we also understand that a lot of times that higher end talent has been wasted. Haha, very funny. It's true down the street, and it's also true at several other stops around the country. And that's where NC State is kind of starting to really creep up on the rest of them, because they've had their hand in the dirt building that blue-collar culture and putting player development first above all else, and they have finally put themselves in a position to now reach up and grab those 4- and 5-star players. When we have a history of not wasting talent, but in fact taking talent and making it better, NC State is going to be in a very dangerous position in a very short amount of time, in the best way possible.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The fact of the matter is this. NC State is not picking up a lot of, or how are other schools picking up 4- and 5-stars? It's very simple. Number one, the brand. Number two, every player is different. Players want different things, right? The one thing that you can say that EA has gotten right with throughout all of the years of NCAA football and all that, recruits value different things.
Yep.
Some recruits are like, hey, I want to play for a national championship. If you can't give me that, I'm going elsewhere, which, obviously – if you're looking at, the Dexter Lawrences and whatnot of the world, or from North Carolina, ended up going to Clemson, or Jordan Davis from North Carolina ended up going to Georgia. If their goal was to play in a national championship and win one, they achieved that in college, which is something that they would not have been able to do at that time at NC State. Now, we could play the Marvel what-if game of, well, what if they came to NC State? Maybe we're going to a national championship and not them. Very possibly so. But as it stood in that moment, different players value different things, and those are the things that those players valued that NC State could not provide. So there will always be other schools getting 4- and 5-stars. The question is, how does NC State get more of them? Because I don't think there's, even the best top recruiting classes of all time, you don't get every 5-star. No school does. You can have a class of all 5-star. You will not get every single one of them. That is not how this game works. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying, hey, the goal shouldn't be to be concerned with other folks and what they're doing. The goal should be, how do we get what we need to be successful?
You keep the blinders on and you win. Everything gets better for your program if you win. It is quite simply as simple as that. You win 10 games, you win an ACC championship, you will get 4- and 5-star players pouring into this program. And then from that point on, blast off, rocket ship into wherever else will go in the near future in the landscape of college football. Just win, baby. It's such a great quote because it is true. Just win. That's all you need to be focusing on. Coming up next, we're going to get into our second half of Mailbag Monday after a quick word from our sponsors. Last couple of minutes of our Monday show. Now getting into the second half of Mailbag Monday. Let's do it. This one comes from Scott Hester, 1192. He says, until I see the first game and how the pack plays, I never believe the hype. Been fooled too many times. I guess we'll find out soon enough. So As a lifelong State fan, I do understand that several of these people still hold this opinion. I would also be lying to you if I didn't still feel at least a sliver of this same feeling. We have been burned so many times in the past. In 2022, for example, although injuries were a large part of the way that season kind of fell apart, it's still disappointing nonetheless. When you have those aspirations, you feel like you have the roster to finally get to what has always been eluding you, and then it kind of all falls apart, especially in week 5. That makes it doubly as tough. It sucks, and I understand that feeling all too well. But I will tell you this. This year already in late July feels different. This roster is more complete in all facets than I have ever seen a roster at NC State. It's better than the 2022 roster. It's better than the 2021 roster. It's better than the 2018 roster or any other roster that Dave Doeren has had here during his tenure at NC State. We're more complete at quarterback, running back, wide receiver. I would argue the offensive line has a really high ceiling. I think that they're one of the question marks, but if they pan out, that could be an ultimate strength. The defensive line, excellent. The linebackers, okay, probably another question mark, but still, you have a lot of returning experience at the linebacker position, and the secondary is maybe deeper than it ever has been. This is a more complete roster than we've ever had here, and that is why I will fully buy into this hype.
Let me tell you something, Scott Hester. You're not wrong. It's okay to feel that way. I mean, here's my thing, right? I've told people about this before, and you know, this is something that I stand behind. When I was at Cass Tech, people didn't believe in us because we were never a championship team. Like historically, they were never that. We just didn't have it. We sent guys D1. We had plenty of talent. They got drafted, really great guys. Cool. As a team, we had won Jack Diddley. Fans did not believe in us until we were in the deepest part of the state playoff. Why? Because they had been burned so many times believing in that team. I'm not mad at Wolfpack fans for not believing, but what I will say is this. Whether or not you believe the hype, whether or not you fully are all in on it, whatever, show up, be loud, be rowdy, right? And then if we see, oh, man, this is a different Wolfpack team, I'm a Detroit Lions fan. People called us the same old Lions forever. Oh, it's the same old, oh, they'll find a way. It's the same old Lions. And granted, there was a lot of same old line activity in the NFC Championship. But guess what? 2 teams went further than them last year. 2. That's it. That's all, and that's it. It's you know, at the end of the day, times change for everybody. At the end of the day, things change for everybody. There was a point in time where NC State had not won a conference championship in football, basketball, or baseball. And how long, Grayson?
37 years, I think it was.
37 years. And all of a sudden, some lowly 10 seed goes along and gets to the Final Four. You see what I'm saying? Like, at the end of the day, it does not matter. I'm not saying that you have to believe the hype, because Grayson and I didn't believe the hype at the beginning of that run. Well, actually, there was no hype, but you get the point. We didn't believe in that team at the beginning of that run. Show up and show out and still be right. We never stopped supporting. We never said, oh, we hope they lose to Louisville so Keats gets fired. It was, hey, we love this team. We hope they succeed. We hope they do well. And, you know, it hasn't panned out so far, but if it does, great. And eventually it did.
Next one comes from B. Bruno, 2389. He says, State needs to open up the pocketbook and stop playing teams like Elon. Well, B. Bruno, I don't want to be the well actually guy, total nerd here. NC State has actually not played Elon since 1936. That's a real fact. 1936 is the last time we played Elon. However, I do understand the underlying sentiment here. Kenton, what are your thoughts on how NC State's been tackling their early non-conference schedule?
I agree and disagree. Here's what I mean about that. Open up the pocketbook for what? If anything, you're closing the pocketbook. When you play teams and you say, hey, you and I, right? Like USC and Alabama, I believe, had some home and homes, or was it Alabama and Florida State, Alabama, USC, all that. Those teams get paid to do that. They do not pay to get into those games. You have to pay Western Carolina to come get their brains beat in. You have to pay for that. Close the pocketbook. I do agree that we need to play a tougher schedule, but close the pocketbook, brother. Don't open that thing up. Don't put the little coin purse away. Keep all your ducats. Keep your coffers full so we can get these young men what they need financially. No need. No need. If I'm bringing through West Virginia, if I'm bringing through Penn State, if I'm bringing through Michigan, Ohio State, USC, if I'm bringing through somebody like that, what am I going to pay you for? This is just a fair game. You think you're the baddest, I think I'm the baddest. Let's meet at the 50-yard line and figure it out. As opposed to if I'm playing the Jackson State, if I'm playing the Mississippi Delta Valley, something like that, where they know, like, hey, we're going to get a 40-point L hung on our head. Like, we need to be compensated for this.
There's a couple points I want to touch on here. One, on some level, you do need a couple tune-ups. They are legitimate games early in the season that you expect to rout your opponent, but you use those games for a lot of underlying purposes in terms of formations, comfortability, building the confidence you need before you run into a team, let's say, like this year in Tennessee. Now, this Tennessee game is one of those mutually agreed upon games, not exactly one that we are paying for directly, but like Kenton mentioned, Western Carolina or App State. App State was in the news with us just like 2 months ago. Why should we open up the pocketbook with really nothing to gain? Because if we beat them, it's ho-hum. You should do that. But if they beat us, we're embarrassed. We never hear the end of it, and we lose a whole lot of money in the process. So I do understand the sentiment. I would like to see NC State play, I guess, a little bit better competition in the non-con, but I also know that it's coming. I believe Florida is coming to Carter Finley in 2026. I know we have Notre Dame on the books a couple more times. I think we take a return trip to Florida in like 2032. That was announced like 6 years ago, and I remember when that came out, I said, I don't know where in the world I'm going to be in 2032, but I can guarantee you I know where I'm going to be on the Saturday that we play in the Swamp. So I say all that to say it's coming. There are more marquee matchups in the non-conference coming for NC State. And another thing that helps with that, winning. We talked about this with Kevin Keats going to the Final Four. Now, all of a sudden, our non-conference schedule is loaded for this coming season. You achieve that level of success in football, and you're more than likely to see a very similar effect. But yes, I do agree with you, B. Bruno. I would like to play better competition than Western Carolina or Louisiana Tech. No disrespect, but it's coming. I promise you, it's coming. And last one comes from David Jones, 8164. Speaking of Western Carolina, he says, we don't need to look past Western Carolina. Remember App State and Michigan at Michigan. David, I will point to one thing here. Western Carolina and App State, they are not the same. App State, way back in 2007, they did pull off probably the most memorable upset in the history of college football. But people also forget App State went on to win the FCS National Championship that very same season. No one else really cared at that point in time because the FCS was the FCS, but they were just a really good football team that went up and beat Michigan. Western Carolina is not that. They are not a good football program. So with all due respect to the Catamounts, I am going to look past you. Now, does it need to be taken seriously? Absolutely. I don't want to beat Western Carolina by a score of 13-10. That would leave a horrible taste in all of our mouths. It needs to be a stand-on business type of game, but we're not in the same ballpark as the Western Carolina. Get in there, get your reps, stay healthy, and build that confidence when you move on to Tennessee.
Yeah, here's the thing. Grayson and I can look past them. It's about the team. Yes. It's about what they do. They cannot look past them. Absolutely. And also, yeah, we don't need to bring up App State and Michigan. You know, at that time, I was one of the biggest Michigan fans in the world. I had a tradition of wearing a ton of layers of hoodies and blankets that all had Michigan somewhere on them. And each time I would not take them off or change them until they lost. And at that time, Michigan was very good. You can imagine what they smelled like by the end of the season back then. But I say all that to say, in all seriousness, you know, Grayson and I, we don't have any more downs left to play in us, right? You know, and this isn't to say, hey, Grayson never had any downs in the play because I didn't have too many myself. I was always on injured reserve or something like that. But in all seriousness, Grayson and I aren't getting on that field. Our countenance, how we look at the game, we could look at it as, they'll do their thing. Sure, it does not matter. If I know for a fact that there are members of the coaching staff and of the staff that listen to this show. I love all y'all. I appreciate y'all for listening. But they make way too much money to let me and Grayson say, let's not take them serious. Affect how serious they take them. That's terrible idea. Terrible idea, bad idea. I do agree. Don't overlook anybody. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's the Zone 6 Titans of I-9 Sports or something like that. If they step on that field, you got to do what you got to do. You got to scout them properly. You got to be ready for that game. You got to show up, train the right way, study the right way, practice the right way, and executing the game. But, again, Grace and I, we can, we're just two talking heads here. And so we can overlook them, but the team cannot.
Many of you are wondering, could NC State beat Western Carolina with Grayson Boone at quarterback? No, they could not. I would lose us the game. I promise you that. And that's why Grayson McCall will be on the field when the time comes. The last thing on earth Coach Dorn would let happen is let this team overlook an opponent like Western Carolina. They won't do it. We will, because we should. We have no business playing a close game with Western Carolina, but they're going to put boot to you-know-where when the time comes. For that reason, I'm not concerned with Western Carolina. That'll do it for us here on Monday. As always, thank you all so much for joining us. ACC Kickoff begins this week. Very exciting week of kicking off the preseason, so to speak, for 2024. You can almost smell football season. It's coming, y'all. Make sure to get all your thoughts down in the comment box. We'll be sure to get to each and every one of those and mash that subscribe button if you have not already. We're now getting close to 2,200. All the support we've seen from Wolfpack fans near and far, it's been nothing short of remarkable. We're so grateful to get on here and do this every single day now. We're back every single day. Football season is nearly upon us. We can't wait to celebrate that every day with y'all on here with us. We'll see y'all tomorrow on Tuesday. And until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.